In 1994, Brazil didn't just win the World Cup, it witnessed something rare. Two players, perfectly out of sync with the world, but perfectly in sync with each other. This is the story of Romario and Bebeto, the perfect duo. The world champions of the past, now fighting to survive. It's the round of 16. The heat of California is unbearable. The crowd is against them, and early in the game, a red card. Brazil are down to 10 men. The pressure is crushing. Every pass feels heavier, every second longer. For a moment it seems like the dream is over. Everything points to disaster. But when hope seems gone, one man refuses to accept defeat. A small man with a giant heart. A man who didn't play for fame, but for love. This is the story of a little man who became a giant on the field and brought his country the greatest glory of all. In the heart of Salvador, under the burning sun of Bahia, a young boy played barefoot in the streets, a ball made of rags and dreams far too big for his small frame. His name was Bebeto. To his neighbors, he was just another skinny kid with a smile too shy to match his ambition. But to him, football was everything. He was small. Too small, they said, too fragile to survive in the rough, unforgiving fields of Brazil. Yet every time he touched the ball, something changed. There was grace in the way he moved, precision, vision, and a calm that seemed out of place for a boy his age. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He just played as if the game itself understood him. And little by little, the streets of Bahia began to whisper his name. Soon those whispers reached the ears of Vitória, one of Bahia's biggest clubs. And that's where the boy who wasn't supposed to make it began to prove everyone wrong. At Vitória, the coaches saw it instantly. Not strength, not size, but something rarer. Intelligence, discipline, and heart. Bebeto didn't overpower defenders, he outsmarted them. He saw passes before they happened. He found spaces no one else could see. In a country built on flair, Bebeto played with precision. While others chased the spotlight, he chased perfection. And soon that quiet boy from Bahia was ready for the biggest challenge of all, the call that every Brazilian dreams of, Flamengo. The moment he arrived in Rio, he was surrounded by noise, cameras, fans, expectations. For most, it would have been overwhelming, but for Bebeto, it was just another game. In Flamengo, he learned to carry the weight of the jersey, to play not just for himself, but for millions. Every match hardened him, every goal silenced another doubt, and soon the same people who once said he was too small began calling him a giant in disguise. But greatness rarely comes without challenge, and Bebeto's rise was about to meet its first test, one that would change the course of his life and of Brazilian football itself. Because somewhere in Rio, another star was rising, louder, bolder, and destined to collide with him. At Flamengo, the boy from Bahia became a man. Surrounded by legends, forged by pressure, Bebeto learned what it truly meant to wear red and black. It wasn't about the noise or the fame. It was about the standard, about earning your name. In a team where talent overflowed, Bebeto's calmness made him stand out. While others celebrated, he analyzed. While others shouted, he listened. And while others dreamed about being heroes, Bebeto dreamed about winning. His touch was delicate, his timing perfect. He didn't run faster, he thought quicker. He didn't fight with strength, he fought with precision. And soon the whispers that once doubted him turned into cheers that filled the Maracanã. He was no longer just a promise, he was becoming the heartbeat of Flamengo. And it was there, in Rio, that destiny finally introduced him to another soul on the same path. A man just as gifted, just as hungry, but the complete opposite of Bebeto, Romario. Fire and ice, the loud and the quiet, the unpredictable genius, and the disciplined craftsman. Together, they were chaos and control, a perfect storm in yellow and green. When they played side by side, defenders didn't stand a chance. Romario would strike like lightning, and Bebeto would follow like thunder. In 1989, Brazil was desperate for hope, 40 years without a Copa America title. That year, inside the Maracanã, the weight of a nation fell on their shoulders. Bebeto and Romario, the perfect duo. The calm before the chaos, the balance between heart and fire. They didn't just play football, they brought Brazil back to life. When the final whistle blew, Brazil was champion again. 40 years of waiting, gone in an instant. But football never lets you rest for long. Just when he reached the top in Brazil, another challenge was waiting, thousands of miles away, in a place where no one knew his name. Spain would test everything he had, his body, his mind, and his faith. And in that silence, far from home, Bebeto would find himself again. Success had made Bebeto a hero in Brazil, but heroes rarely stay in one place for long. In 1992, he packed his bags, leaving behind the beaches of Rio for the quiet streets of Galicia, Spain. His new home, Deportivo La Coruña. For most players, it was a step down, a small club, far from the glamour of Madrid or Barcelona. But for Bebeto, it was a test, a chance to prove that his talent didn't depend on fame, on noise, or on anyone else. In Spain, the crowd didn't chant his name. The press didn't follow his every move. It was silence. And in that silence, he rebuilt himself. He learned a different rhythm, colder, tactical, unforgiving. Defenders were stronger, the pitches rougher, and the nights lonelier. But adversity didn't break him. It refined him. At Deportivo, he became something more than a striker. He became a leader. He scored goals, dozens of them. But what made him special wasn't the numbers. It was the way he carried himself, calm, professional, relentless. He brought to Spain the same discipline that had made him a champion in Brazil. But now, he paired it with wisdom. Every goal he scored was a message to the world. In 1993, he became the top scorer in La Liga, ahead of names far bigger than his. Yet even then, Brazil barely noticed, while the world talked about others. Romario in Barcelona, new stars rising back home, Bebeto worked quietly, waiting, because deep inside, he knew something no one else did. His story with Brazil wasn't over, and destiny once again was calling. The mission? Bring the World Cup back home. For 24 years, Brazil had waited for another trophy. For Bebeto, it had been a lifetime preparing for one last chance, but no amount of preparation could have predicted what was coming. World Cup 1994, 24 years since Brazil had lifted the trophy. The pressure was suffocating. The ghosts of 1982 and 1986 still haunted the nation. Years of beautiful football that ended in heartbreak. The world didn't believe anymore, even Brazil didn't. But inside that team, something different was growing. Unity, maturity, and faith. Romario and Bebeto, the fire and the calm, reunited at last, this time wearing the same yellow shirt. Two men who couldn't be more different, yet shared the same dream, to bring Brazil back to glory. Their chemistry was instant. Together, they were unstoppable. In the group stage, Bebeto struck against Cameroon, quiet, deadly, efficient. But as the tournament went on, Brazil began to feel the weight of destiny. The knockout stage arrived. Independence Day in America, but it was Brazil fighting for freedom. The heat in California was brutal, over 100 degrees. The air thick, the tension thicker, and then disaster. A red card. Brazil down to 10 men. The world held its breath. The mighty Brazil. One step from collapse. The crowd roared for the underdog. The hosts smelled blood. For a moment it seemed like the dream was ending right there. But that's not what happened, because one man refused to accept defeat. Small, silent, but unshaken. In the 72nd minute, Romario slipped a pass through the defense. The little giant had saved Brazil. That single strike, calm and perfect, carried the weight of an entire nation. Brazil advanced, but fate wasn't finished with him yet. In the quarter-finals against the Netherlands came the moment that would define his legacy. The match was chaos, and then, in the 63rd minute, Bebeto broke free. That celebration, that moment, transcended football. It wasn't about goals anymore. It was about life, family, and love. 3 men, 1 emotion. The whole world smiled with them. It was more than a goal. It was hope, joy, and tenderness wrapped in yellow and green. Brazil went on to win 3-2, then beat Sweden, and finally faced Italy in the final. After 24 years, the World Cup was coming home. Amid the noise, the tears, and the chaos, Bebeto stood still. He had achieved everything he ever dreamed of. The boy from Bahia, the small man everyone doubted, was now a world champion. But even on that night of glory, as the confetti rained down, the story was already beginning to fade, because history remembers the loudest voices, and Bebeto was never loud. The world would move on, to new stars, new headlines, new heroes. But the legacy of the little giant was only just beginning. Glory fades quickly. In football, it always does. One day, you're lifting the World Cup. The next, the world moves on. After 1994, Bebeto kept doing what he always did, playing with dignity, humility, and heart. But the spotlight had shifted. The headlines were about Romario, the genius, the showman, the voice. And Bebeto, he was the quiet hero. The man who had carried Brazil through the heat and the chaos, now slipping silently into the shadows. He scored goals, led teams, and continued to wear the yellow shirt with pride. He even returned in 1998, older, slower, but wiser, still giving everything he had for his country. But time, as it always does, kept moving forward. The new generation came, the cameras turned away. And yet, Bebeto never complained. He had seen enough to understand that greatness isn't about applause, it's about the moments that outlive you. And his moment, that simple gesture of love, became eternal, because that celebration wasn't about fame or glory. It was about love, about the human side of the game. In that 1 second, Bebeto reminded the world what football really is, not just a sport, but a language of emotion.
When I was born, God looked down, pointed at me and said, "He's the man."
They called him arrogant, a rebel, undisciplined. They said his personality was too big for the Brazilian national team, that his explosive behavior could cost an entire nation its World Cup dream. But when Brazil stood on the brink of missing the World Cup for the first time in history, only one man had what it took to change their fate. A wild spirit no one could tame, yet on the pitch he turned the impossible into reality. This is the story of a temperamental genius, a player who broke rules, defied authority, and pushed every limit. But when his country desperately needed a hero, he was the only one who could turn chaos into glory. Born in 1966, in the heart of one of Rio de Janeiro's most infamous favelas, Romario de Souza Faria didn't have an easy start in life. His father worked as a bricklayer. His mother, a homemaker, was the foundation of the family. And even through poverty and hardship, she never stopped encouraging her son to chase his dream. There wasn't much money, but there was talent, real, undeniable talent. From a young age, Romario stood out. He wasn't just skilled, he was fearless. He didn't just play, he dared. And with that talent came fire, a sharp attitude, a stubborn, untamed genius. His first steps in football came with Estrelinha, a small amateur team his father created in Vila da Penha. From day one, Romario stood out. He was clearly different. By 1979, he joined the youth squad at Olaria. And there, his nose for goal stood out just as much as his temper. He didn't like being benched. He didn't take criticism well. Even as a kid, you could tell he wasn't built for the bench. He was born for the big stage. Romario's talent didn't go unnoticed. Vasco da Gama brought him into their youth system. And that's when the legend really started to take shape. Even among the most talented players, Romario stood apart. He was lightning fast, his dribbling was tight and precise, and in front of the goal, he was ice cold. But what really made him different was his attitude. He had that swagger, he was confident, some would even say arrogant. He didn't bow to anyone, he didn't care about pleasing coaches. Romario played every match like he knew he was the best on the field, and maybe he was. In 1985, at just 19 years old, he was promoted to Vasco's senior team. It didn't take long before the goals started pouring in. From 1985 to 1988, Romario scored 70 goals for the club. Defenders gave him a nickname, the Hellish Little Man. Then came 1988. He was called up for the Olympic Games in Seoul. And that's when the world truly took notice. 7 goals in 6 matches, a silver medal, and a star was born. That performance opened the gates to Europe. The boy from Jacarezinho, who once dribbled through the dusty streets of Vila da Penha, was now ready to cross the ocean and prove that his talent knew no limits. In 1988, after shining at the Olympic Games, Romario took his first big step abroad. He signed with PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands, his first European club. But even far from home, he didn't change. Romario wasn't trying to fit in. He was just being himself. From the very beginning, he lit up the Dutch league. Between 1988 and 1993, he scored over 100 goals for PSV, won 3 league titles, and led the scoring charts 3 seasons in a row. But along with the goals came the drama. He skipped training sessions, clashed with reporters, was always making headlines for the wrong reasons. Still, no matter what he did off the pitch, he always delivered on it. While he impressed Europe, he also started making history with Brazil. In 1989, playing at home, Romario was the driving force behind Brazil's Copa America win. It had been 40 years since the national team lifted that trophy. And in the final, at the Maracanã, Romario scored the winning goal against Uruguay. He was the difference maker, and next to him was Bebeto. A new partnership was born, and it would soon become legendary. Romario was on fire, and with the 1990 World Cup approaching, all eyes were on him. Everyone expected him to lead Brazil's attack, but fate had other plans. In March of that year, just 3 months before the tournament, he suffered a serious ankle injury playing for PSV. He had to undergo surgery, and even though he recovered quickly, he wasn't fully fit by the time the World Cup began. Still, coach Sebastião Lazzaroni brought him to Italy. But Romario spent most of the tournament on the bench. He played just once, against Scotland. No goals, no magic, nothing. Brazil was knocked out in the round of 16, defeated by Argentina, by Maradona, by Canigia. It was a painful exit, a lost tournament, and for Romario, pure frustration. He knew he could have made a difference, but he never got the chance. And if there's one thing Romario never did, it was stay quiet. Back in Europe, he kept doing what he did best, scoring goals, lots of them. But the off-field issues never really went away. He'd show up late, vanish during holidays. He lived by his own rules and never asked for permission. That attitude eventually started to cause friction with the Brazilian national team. Even though he was the most lethal striker in the world, he was being left out of the squad. coach Carlos Alberto Parreira didn't hide the reason.
Look, nobody questions Romario's talent. But right now, I need a group that's committed, disciplined, and represents the image this national team stands for. And unfortunately, his behavior just didn't align with that.
And then, everything reached a boiling point. Brazil was getting ready for a friendly against Germany. Romario had been called up, but during training, something unexpected happened. Coach Carlos Alberto Parreira put him with the reserves. No explanation, no heads up, just benched. Romario didn't argue, he accepted it, but not in silence. The next day, he faced the press, and he didn't hold back.
Of course, I didn't like being on the bench. I traveled 16 hours to play, not to sit and watch, but in the end, it's the coaching staff who makes the decisions.
It was raw, honest. That was just Romario being Romario, but the coaching staff didn't like it, not one bit. They acted fast and cut him from the squad. Just like that, Brazil moved on without its top scorer. Weeks passed, then months, and for over a year, the national team played without him. To many, it felt like that was it, his time with the national team over, and the dream of playing in the World Cup slipping further and further away. But football always leaves room for a twist, and fate wasn't quite done with Romario. In 1993, a new door opened. Barcelona came calling. Led by the legendary Johan Cruyff, they wanted something different. Cruyff wasn't just looking for a striker, he wanted magic. He wanted someone unpredictable, someone lethal. And he knew if he could channel Romario's fire, he'd have the deadliest striker on the planet. Romario arrived full of confidence and backed it up immediately. 30 goals in his first La Liga season, plays that looked more like art than football. Big wins, big moments, and then El Clásico, Barcelona versus Real Madrid. Final score, 5-0. Romario scored 3 of them and sent the Camp Nou into a frenzy. The fans were in love, Spain was in awe, the world took notice. He had become the king of Catalonia. But even at the very top of the football world, one thing still haunted him. The yellow jersey, the national team, the World Cup dream. While he conquered Europe, Romario was still out of the Brazilian squad. While Romario dazzled in Europe, the Brazilian national team was struggling. After the round of 16 exit in the 1990 World Cup, Carlos Alberto Parreira took charge. A methodical coach, disciplined, risk-averse. His plan was simple. Build a well-balanced team, tactically disciplined, functional, efficient. But there was one thing missing, actually a few things. Flair, courage, and Romario. Parreira chose system over spark, teamwork over instinct. Players who followed orders without question. But without Romario, Brazil's attack lost its edge. There was no one to break the game open, no one who could decide a match in a single touch. The results? Worrying. Fans were frustrated. The press was ruthless. For Brazil, qualifying was supposed to be a formality, but it turned into a nightmare. A shocking loss to Bolivia, a draw against Ecuador, narrow wins at home. And for the first time in history, Brazil was in real danger of missing a World Cup. The pressure was immense. Parreira was under fire. Still, the coaching staff refused to call Romario. Parreira kept saying, "I can't bring in a player who'll destabilize the group." But the truth? The group was already falling apart. The team was tense, flat, lifeless, no confidence, no identity. The final game of the qualifiers, win or stay home. That was the scenario. The pressure was immense. And in the end, they did what they said they never would. They brought him back. No longer seen as a problem, he had become a nation's last hope. That night, the Maracanã was electric. Over 90,000 fans packed the stadium. The tension felt like war. On the other side, Uruguay, a heavyweight. And fear was real, but one name echoed through the stands. He stood there, calm, focused, like a predator waiting for his moment. From the first whistle, Brazil was nervous, tense, anxious. But at 22 minutes into the first half, a pass from Bebeto found him. Romario struck it first time, sharp, clean, unstoppable. The Maracanã erupted. He was back, and he wasn't done. At 39 minutes of the second half, Bebeto delivered again, and Romario found the net once more. Game over. Brazil was going to the World Cup. Mission complete. Romario had returned with a statement. After that night at the Maracanã, there were no more doubts. Romario had to go to the World Cup. This time, no one dared to question it, and the mission was just beginning. The world was watching. Brazil was dreaming. In the opening match against Russia, it took Romario just 26 minutes to show why he was there. Against Cameroon, once again, right place, right time. And as the World Cup unfolded, with all its chaos, pressure, and impossible challenges, Romario was there, calm when the world trembled, deadly when it mattered most. Thanks to his brilliance, Brazil clawed its way back to the biggest stage of all. But destiny had one final twist. This wouldn't be decided by flair, by magic, or by a moment of genius. The greatest battle of them all would be settled from the penalty spot. A test not just of skill, but of nerve, of heart, of soul. And now a nation held its breath. At that point, there was no debate. Romario was the best player in the tournament. The kid from Jacarezinho, the problem, the rebel, was one step away from immortality. Four-time champions, 24 years later. And right there, in the middle of the field, was Romario. They called him arrogant, called him a problem, undisciplined. But in the end, he was the hero Brazil needed. An icon, a legend. He didn't follow rules, didn't ask for approval, didn't play politics. He just delivered. He turned chaos into glory.